Hi there, welcome back. This is part two of the Digital App Dice video series. In this one, we're going to be kind of grabbing some categories from a Google Sheet and then pulling them into our Digital App Dice code. So in a sheet, you'll see here I've already got the sheet built, two sheets, a web and a mobile with some categories already created. I'm going to open up the script editor, get started. This is where we get to do the fun stuff. Google Apps Script, JavaScript coding. All right, so opening up that script editor, taking its time. And while it does that, let me just kind of reorient myself. Okay, and it is still going. Google Apps Script is not always the fastest thing in the world when you are not on a good internet connection. Okay, so I'm just going to call this Digital App Dice Categories and let that save for a minute. And we're going to be kind of turning this into, oh goodness, Digital App Dice Categories. Okay, got that saved after a minute. We're going to be kind of building an API here with the doGet function, which is one of those built-in triggers to Google Apps Script. And it allows us to kind of create a URL that we can hit and then have it return data. So in this doGet function, I'm going to declare a result object variable, just an empty object. I'm going to call this one mobile, and there I'm going to get spreadsheet app.getActive spreadsheet get sheet by name, and we'll call this one mobile. Then I'm going to actually space down to another line, but this is actually still in that same chain, and I'm going to call it get data range, and I'll space down again and get values. I didn't put a semicolon until this very last value. That's because these are all chained one after the other. Spreadsheet app is chained with this dot to get active spreadsheet, okay? So be very careful about that. Then I also need to declare a web variable, and that's going to be almost exactly the same thing, except instead of mobile here, I'm going to call it web. Now, I'm going to want to modify these get values that are returned and then add them to this result object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say between, right after I declare this mobile, I'm going to call it result.mobile equals get object, and I'm going to pass that mobile variable. Now get object doesn't exist yet, so I'm going to go ahead and declare it down here, get object, and this is going to take in an array. I'll just call it ARR, and then it's going to return an object. I'll just call it OBJ. Now, I haven't done any work in this yet, but I will come back to that momentarily, because the same thing is going to happen after web. So I'm going to call this result.web equals get object. And I'm going to pass it that web variable. And then the whole thing, this doGet method, that's being triggered when you hit this URL, is going to return a content service. And we're going to create text output. and I'm going to call a built-in JSON function called stringify, where I'm going to pass result. Result is this object that we've built here, and now it should have a mobile property and a web property. So I'm going to pass that in there. I'm going to space down. Again, I didn't end it with a semicolon. It's all chained together. And then I'm going to set the MIME type to ContentService service. If I can type service out, MIME_type.json. And then I can put that semicolon. I'm going to space some things out here, get the right indentation so that I can track what I'm doing. Okay. Now, really, I could, put all my declarations here at the top and then do all the work at the bottom. But just to kind of make everything clear, I am grabbing all of the values from that mobile sheet. I'm getting them into one big multi-dimensional array, and then I'm going to send them to getObject, where I'm going to turn it into an object that I can work with, and then I'm going to send that object that I can work with out into the world. Out into the world to do work and live life. Okay, so let's write out our getObject function here. First, I need to get the headers from that multi-dimensional array, and I'm going to do that by just shifting off the first row. In that multi-dimensional array, the first element, that 0 index, is going to be this right here, this row 1. So we're going to shift that off. Then I'm going to declare that object. It's going to be empty. Then I'm going to loop var I equals 0, I is less than, headers dot length, and then I plus plus. Ooh, I cannot type today. I tell you what, typing becomes very difficult when you are filming, but it's not so difficult when you're not recording. Very interesting. So in that object that I declared, we're going to take headers I, and that's going to equal to array.map. Map is, again, I've talked about map in some of my other projects. It is an array method that just takes every single index one at a time. So array map, and then we're going to get all of the apps as we map through it. And there we go. And to close that out, there we go. That should suffice. Okay. And I'm going to return app index I. Now, in our object headers, we're basically mapping all of the apps that fall under that specific header, returning that result back into either mobile or web, and then we are sending that out into the world. And to send it out into the world, we actually have to publish this as a web app. I want to execute the app as myself, and anyone, even anonymous, has access to it. So this isn't really something you want to do with, student data or anything that's private. But, my list of apps here, I don't mind if somebody wants to be able to, access that with a, it's just read-only data anyways. So to make sure that we have done that correctly, you'll notice I published this, and it's got a URL. We're going to actually copy that URL, and we're going to go back to our digital app dice, and in our JavaScript at the bottom of index.html, we are going to call some jQuery. We're going to call it getJSON. I'm going to copy that URL into here, and then it's literally called then. The method is called then. I'm going to actually cut this URL out. I'm going to declare this. I'll call it category URL. And I'm going to copy this whole string out here so we can see everything a little clearly. Paste it there. And inside getJSON, I'm going to call it category URL. And then in the then, I'm going to call it response. And I'll console log that response so we can take a look at what we have. And I'll go back into my testing with the latest code. And we can see what we've got there. And in the console, you should be able to see that object that we're sending back here. We've got a property of mobile and web. And then inside mobile audio, we've got an array of 6 values that kind of correspond to, where are we? Mobile audio correspond to these apps that we have here. And that should be the same for all of them. Pretty cool, right? And just like that, we have put those categories into our application. In part 3, I'm going to go ahead and build out how we can put those categories into these drop-downs, because we want to be able to select these drop-downs under each of our dice. So that is going to be coming up in part 3. So stay tuned, stick around if you enjoy building these kind of tools.